Remarkable the way he got young people to engage with politics and cut down on his
And
crime.
he recognised that there is a free speech problem in a lot of our universities, and he deliberately went into the heart of those campuses, challenged views, invited people to challenge him, and did change his mind at certain points. He was an absolute champion of free speech and the free exchange of ideas. An incredible loss
Really
to America and all of the West, really. Well, we'd love to hear what you think about that and all the other topics we're covering today. Go on gbnews.com/your say.
First, we're going to get your 60-second news update with Sam Francis.
Very good morning, 9:30, making the news this hour. A nationwide manhunt is underway in the US after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot dead mid-speech at a Utah university. Witnesses say a single shot from a rooftop hit his neck. Donald Trump has called it a heinous assassination and a dark moment for America. Sir Keir Starmer is facing mounting pressure over US Ambassador Lord Mandelson after fresh documents show he once called Jeffrey Epstein his best pal. Mandelson says he foolishly relied on Epstein's lies, but critics say his position is now untenable. Labour MP Emily Thornberry has dropped out of the race to replace Angela Rayner as deputy leader. 4 candidates remain. MPs have until 5 p.m. today to secure enough support to progress. A major intervention on the ECHR. Suella Braverman, Richard Tice and Lord Frost will unveil a roadmap to freedom today, setting out how the UK could quit the treaty. And in travel, tube services remain suspended on day 5 of the RMT strike over pay and hours. The Labour mayor says TfL is ready to start talks. Meanwhile, e-bike trips have surged as commuters find workarounds. Those are the headlines for now. A full roundup at 10.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, welcome back. This is Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, a manhunt is underway following the killing of free speech champion and the co-founder of Turning Point in USA, Charlie Kirk, only 31 years old, after he was shot dead at an event at Utah Valley University.
Yes, and there has been an outpouring of condemnation and support for Charlie Kirk, as President Donald Trump calls it a dark day for America.
Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace.
While experts in America are calling it a nation on edge and warning of a vicious spiral in political violence.
Well, let's go to our GB News presenter, Bev Turner, live from Washington, D.C. Bev, morning. Good to talk to you again, but I'm sorry we're talking to you on such a very, very sad day, because Charlie Kirk was a remarkable young man.
Yeah, good morning, both. I was about to say the same thing. It's nice to talk to you, but when I came over here to Washington to help GB News launch this new show out here, I had no idea I'd be talking to you in such tragic circumstances for the first time. A lot of people in the UK will not know who Charlie Kirk is, and I'm looking at our inbox this morning, and a lot of our viewers are saying, I'd never heard of him, but what a remarkable man. But as you were saying, Miriam, if you have any young people in your life, you are going to know who Charlie Kirk is. My own teenagers that I was talking to about this in the last 24 hours, 12 hours since this happened, were saying, Charlie Kirk made us think. And that is very rare, actually, for young people today. Often it can feel in the education system in Great Britain, and particularly, and in America as well, the actual independent thought is not necessarily encouraged. Critical thinking is something to be shied away from. And what I loved about Charlie Kirk is the fact that he would stand there in these university campuses, or he'd go on podcasts with people who disagreed with him, and he would take on the issues. He never played the man. He always played the ball. He didn't go in for personal attacks. He'd talk about ideas. And he would always end those conversations with a handshake and to say, you're wrong, I'm right, we disagree. His legacy is going to be one of free speech, democracy, ideas, and conservative values unashamedly. A devout Christian and a devout conservative who was genuinely rallying grassroots support. I think you said, Andrew, you know, he definitely helped Donald Trump win the election. That is no exaggeration. And he's an honorary member of their family. You know, it was the president himself yesterday who announced the death of Charlie Kirk. And that's almost unprecedented, I imagine.
And Bev, I think the worry, the fear will be that does this in some way suppress free speech? Will people feel reluctant to speak out because Charlie Kirk is a martyr to free speech, but we don't want any more? And some people may feel it's too scary, particularly in America, where the gun policy is so reckless and irresponsible.
So right, Andrew, because actually the political right are very strong in the social media, in the alternative journalism space. Charlie Kirk is just one of many who have gathered enormous followings by speaking out of what they might see as the mainstream establishment media being predominantly left-wing in the UK and the US. And so they found these spaces where they can have their values heard. And of course, social media last night, and will be this morning as people wake up here in America, was full of people on the right saying, I'm now self-censoring. I need to process what's happened here. I need to stop and think, is it worth being so controversial if there could be a sniper on a roof waiting for me when I walk out because I've said something controversial? You know, Charlie Kirk had all the big issues in his sights: transgender activism, as what he described as the rise of Islam across the West that he didn't think was compatible with Christian values. As we say, free speech, very, very strong advocate of the fact that you should be able to speak your mind freely without threat of violence. The implications of Charlie Kirk's death will be felt across America. They'll be felt all across the world. I believe there's a vigil in London being held tomorrow. As I say, it's only, what time is it now? I'm 5 hours behind you, so it's only 4:30 in the morning here. But as America wakes up this morning, no doubt there will be tributes being paid, there will be vigils, there will be marches. And we're yet to see what will happen with his funeral, because of course Donald Trump is due to be in the UK next week to meet King Charles on this state visit. But I would be surprised if the funeral goes ahead without the Trump family in attendance. So it may be that that's delayed until the end of next week. But of course, that will be a huge security operation here in America.
Bev Turner, live from Washington, D.C., and we will be returning to you throughout the programme. Thank you so much, Bev.
Before we talk to our next guest, Miriam, as an MP, how aware were you made of the potential for, we know about the abuse you get on social media, but the potential for physical attack?
Yes, very aware, and you know, I was fortunate I didn't ever have an actual physical attack, although I did receive threats like most people. Some of my colleagues did endure actual violence, as we know. But I think the frightening thing is not that you know you're vulnerable. Of course you are if you put yourself up for election. But I think it's actually the demonisation of political opponents. And yes, this is about free speech. Of course it's about free speech. But more specifically, it's about, can we disagree well, robustly, even offensively sometimes, but always acknowledging that the person on the other side is a human being, has the right to peaceful life. And I think that's what became very difficult towards the end of my time being an MP, is that it increasingly felt that people, particularly with conservative views, normal conservative views, were being called hateful, even Nazis. And then once people get that idea into their head, you are dehumanised and you do start to fear for your own safety.
And we shouldn't forget, in the last decade, 2 British MPs were murdered, one by a far-right fanatic, that was during the referendum campaign, and David Lamis was murdered by an Islamist in his constituency surgery, which could have meant the MPs putting up the shutters on their constituency surgeries. to protect themselves, but most, I gather, still
Well,
hold
I think
surgeries
people
before.
do hold surgeries, but don't advertise them in advance in the sense that most MPs would expect people to make an appointment, so you have at least got the chance to vet them. But, you know, we can always put it down to, people with mental health problems, or this person, you know, had this extremist point of view. And that's often true of the actual killer. But the point is it takes place in an environment where people feel it's OK to delegitimise their opponents, as we're seeing all the time.
Jo Cox was murdered outside her constituency office, if I recall. So we are talking, if you're talking about the murder, the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, he was just 31, and he was probably one of the most significant influencers in the United States, particularly with young people. And I think he's a significant reason why Donald Trump won such a comfortable victory in the election, because so many young people voted Trump.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. He had such a reach as well, didn't he, online?
Yeah. Well, let's talk now, to you as political journalist, Laurie Laird. Laurie, this is terrible. Did you know Charlie?
I wasn't I didn't know him personally. Of course, I'm familiar with his work because he had become such an important influence in politics. One thing that surprised me, particularly after it triggered after hearing Beverly Turner's comments just a few moments earlier, my own children, who are not politically engaged, who are not particularly well educated, were very closely following this story last night. My family group chat was lighting up all evening, and that really surprised me. And it shows you what influence Charlie Kirk had, even here in the UK, which is where my apolitical children grew up. That really surprised me how engaged they were.
And I think, Laurie, and certainly the case with my children as well, and teenagers here, even though he wasn't even British, it's perhaps the first time they'd heard conservative ideas articulated powerfully in their generation. And we forget, just a generation ago, ideas about family, faith, national identity, they were mainstream ideas. And yet they've been so suppressed in the last 10 or 20 years that for many young people, Charlie Kirk was the first time they had an opportunity to hear that kind of politics expressed.
Well, again, my kids are really not that political, and their political ideas I do not find to be all that well thought out. They're in their late teens and early 20s. But the fact that they realized that Charlie Kirk was such an important voice in U.S. politics and by extension worldwide politics really surprised me. And they were extremely upset to learn that somebody who is engaged in politics had been shot unceremoniously, has become a victim of a political crime. And I think this is something that we really need to discuss more. There's a minority of Americans on both sides of the aisle, but a growing number who are telling pollsters that they believe that violence is acceptable in getting the political outcomes that they seek. This is extremely concerning. And some of the responses we've heard from the Republicans, and look, of course, Republicans are absolutely shell-shocked. This is such a terrible development. But hearing a number of them say that this is the radical left, it's radical left rhetoric that is causing this, I feel is inflaming passions a little bit, because we're seeing this acceptance of political violence on both sides of the aisle. And you only have to think back to last summer when two Minnesota state senators were killed, were shot. Two were killed, one with her husband, another a male state senator, and his wife survived. But the perpetrator of that was found with documentation that suggested that he was against their pro-abortion stance. So we're seeing this growing acceptance of political violence happening on both sides. I don't think that it's fair to blame one side or the other. Of course, the other problem that America has, Andrew, which you so articulately pointed out, is this easy access to firearms. So somebody who believes that political violence is acceptable doesn't have to work very hard to get the means to assassinate an opponent. And this is something that Americans on every political persuasion should be concerned about. Let's look at Utah, where this assassination took place. The gun laws in Utah are so very loose. You do not need a permit to purchase a firearm. Dealers do not need to be licensed. There's no rule insisting that you lock your firearms up. As a result, and I'm digressing a bit, Utah has one of the highest rates of teenage gun suicide because these firearms are easily easily accessible. So there are a number of things that Americans can do. I don't know how we take down the political heat.
Laurie, I'm so sorry. We are going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your insight this morning.
And that is fascinating about Utah's gun laws.
Yeah.
They don't have any. It's a free-for-all. It's the Wild West, I'm afraid. It's guns in America. More guns than people, which means there's more than 330 million guns in the United States.
Gosh,
it's just shocking statistic, isn't it?
Well, still coming up, we're going to be joined by the veteran former Cabinet Minister, Michael Gove. But up next...
Sir Keir Starmer under huge pressure. He's clinging on to his ambassador, Lord Mandelson, after leaked emails revealed he told Jeffrey Epstein the day before he went to prison how much he loved him and how he must fight for early release. Frankly, disgusting.
But before all that, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here is the weather forecast.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's set to be a day of sunshine and showers, though more frequent areas of rain across the far northwest of Scotland, and on the whole, a windy day for all. Now, we do need to keep an eye on the far northwest of Scotland. A chance we could see some warnings here, some quite blustery weather, a chance of some coastal gales, and also some quite heavy downpours of persistent rain that will likely linger through much of the day. Some brighter, sunny spells elsewhere, but there's also going to be a mixture of showers. So it's
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, Dame Helen Mirren has said that despite being a feminist, she believes the next James Bond has to be a chap.
OK, she said that she believes it just doesn't work, and by having a woman as Bond, the project becomes something else entirely.
So we are asking the question, could Bond ever be a woman?
Well, we're joined by a former what is termed Bond girl, Jenny Hanley, and and there is, we're expecting you, but it's really 007 podcast contributor John Kell there as well. Jenny, you've been there, done it, got the T-shirt, been involved in it. What's your take?
I think James Bond has to be a male, because he came from the imagination of Ian Fleming. If you want a female 007, don't ride on his coattails and take the fame that has come from his character, James Bond. Write your own.
Yeah, you see, that's what I tend to think. But
no, I just think that you just go 007. The problem is, right, the last Bond film, he died. James Bond died. I mean, there was a... Oh, sorry.
Great, I haven't seen that one.
Sorry, yeah. I think everybody pretty much now knows that he definitely... I mean, there was an absolutely... It wasn't even did he or didn't he, can he or can he not survive. It was 100% gone. So it's now time for a clean... The nice thing about a clean sheet, surely, John, is that you can actually go, right, so 007, let's do the 007, and then we can do different stories, because the books that have been written by Ian Fleming have been well and truly milked, haven't they?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8 minutes to 10. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Now, if it wasn't for Charlie Kirk, this programme would be dominated by the fact Peter Manson is still ambassador to the United States, despite the release of another tranche of emails, which are excruciating. The one in particular that I found deeply offensive, Miriam, was the day before Epstein goes to prison for trafficking girls as young as 14.
Yeah.
He sends him a message saying how much he loves him and to fight for early release, strategy. Why would a former cabinet minister who's about to go back into the cabinet in a few years' time send a message like that?
Yeah.
It was a transactional relationship with Epstein. What was he getting out of Epstein?
Well, I mean, looking at the emails, and the Telegraph has done an astonishing job reporting them all and putting them into chronological order, but he clearly thought Epstein was a friend. And he said that he was deceived by his lies. But that seems extraordinarily naive, given the nature of the crime. And you would have thought that had Mandelson had any thoughts of his own political career, for example, he would have thought, I need to steer clear of this chap.
He's had a fatal flaw throughout his political career, and it has been an attraction to wealthy, powerful businessmen. Greed is what it really is all about.
Yeah.
He lost his first job in the cabinet over not declaring a £373,000 loan from Geoffrey Robinson, who was a multi-millionaire Labour MP. He lost his cabinet job the second time because he got too close to the Hinduja brothers, billionaires. He says he was subsequently cleared of any wrongdoing, but he lost his job over it.
Yeah.
Is he going to lose his job again because of this
well,
time with another
lots of Labour MPs are now coming out and saying that it's disgusting.
6 so far.
We've seen Mike Tapp on
the Home Office Minister today
yesterday
on
saying
GB
that he
News.
must have been fully vetted, but then that means surely that the government knew not only what was going on, but also that more might come out. Mandelson himself has admitted that. And now it seems that there are some documents that link Mandelson and Blair to Epstein and his access to Westminster influence long after the crime was known.
It is extraordinary. Now, we have to read this live. In response to the release of the latest emails, Lord Mandelson said, I relied on assurances of his innocence that turned out later to be horrendously false. His lawyers claimed that it was a shakedown of him, a criminal conspiracy. I foolishly relied on their word, which I regret to this day.
Prime Minister's official spokesman said he had no plans to speak to Lord Mandelson about the letter and declined to say whether Sir Keir knew about the extent of Lord Mandelson's friendship with Epstein or whether he knew about that photo album.
I don't think he's getting rid of him. We're going to go to the weather.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's set to be a day of sunshine and showers, though more frequent areas of rain across the far northwest of Scotland, and on the whole, a windy day for all. Now, we do need to keep an eye on the far northwest of Scotland. A chance we could see some warnings here, some quite blustery weather, a chance of some coastal gales, and also some quite heavy downpours of persistent rain that will likely linger through much of the day. Some brighter, sunny spells elsewhere, but there's also going to be a mixture of showers, so it's best to keep your raincoat close. And also quite a breezy day once again, particularly around coastal areas. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, highs reaching around 20 degrees Celsius in the southeast. To finish off the day, there'll still be areas of rain across western Scotland, still quite blustery with a chance of some heavier downpours. The far northeast of Scotland, though, should be mostly dry to finish off the day. Plenty of showers once again across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. A chance these could be heavy, still with a risk of hail and thunder even by the time we reach later into the afternoon. Wales, southwest England too, seeing quite frequent showers but becoming more isolated across central areas of England and across the southeast. Through the course of the night, we will continue to see those showers, those longer spells of rain still circling the far northwest of Scotland before eventually pushing it their way into northern areas. Still a chance of some heavier showers even as we head our way through towards dawn, but across central England, the far east and southeast turning drier here, feeling a little cooler too. And on the whole, it is going to be a fairly cool and fresh start, particularly where we see those prolonged clear spells. Friday is set to be a fairly similar day. There is still going to be a risk of showers. The main firing zone for the showers across any western areas, so western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and across Wales and southwest England. Across central areas and eastern areas, a few more brighter spells, but still a risk of the occasional shower. Still quite breezy and once again similar temperatures, highs reaching around 20 degrees Celsius in the southeast.
Today, clouds overhead.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists should be aware of a broken down vehicle affecting the A9 southbound at Kincraig. Please approach with caution and allow extra time for your journey. In Surrey, congestion on the A3 southbound between junctions with the A244 and the A245 is causing delays of around 1 hour. Normal traffic conditions are expected to resolve later this morning. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast services are experiencing disruptions at Stoke-on-Trent. Additionally, Caledonian sleeper routes are facing issues between Inverness and Perth. Stay informed with the latest updates. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
This is your chance to win a motorhome and cash in our biggest giveaway to date. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be the proud owner of this 2025 Benamar Primero. It comfortably accommodates 4 people and can be driven on your standard driving licence. Plus, you'll also bank an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Thursday the 11th of September. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
The American Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, just 31 years old, has been shot and killed at a campus event in Utah.
Well, the shooter remains at large and we'll have the latest throughout the show. Tributes have poured in as Donald Trump has called it a dark day for America.
Violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible.
Well, our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has called the killing heartbreaking, saying there can be no place for political violence.
And this is Bev Turner in Washington, D.C. as America wakes up to the news that the killer is still on the run. But given Charlie Kirk's position within the Trump family, all resources will be committed to finding the murderer.
And Sir Keir Starmer under growing pressure over the ambassador, Lord Mandelson, ambassador to America, after new emails revealed he urged Jeffrey Epstein just the day before he was sent to prison to fight for early release. He also told him how much he loved him. There's going to be an urgent question in Parliament this morning.
And a day that shook the world and changed history forever. Today, we remember those who lost their lives in those 9/11 attacks.
And support for the monarchy has slumped to a record low, with calls for abolition growing 5-fold. So with the King set to host Donald Trump next week, we're asking, is the crown losing its shine? Well, Charlie Kirk, if the funeral is next week, we don't know when it will be, but if it is as soon as next week, is that going to impact on the state visit? Because I think Donald Trump would want to be there. Because it's unprecedented, in my view, for the American president to announce to the world the death of Charlie Kirk, who was a great cheerleader for Trump and Make America Great Again, and a significant factor, I think, in Trump's election victory.
Absolutely, and the fact that he's ordered American flags to be flown at half-mast. Remember, Charlie Kirk was not an elected political representative. He was a campaigner, an organiser, yes, but the influence he's had is just phenomenal. And the thing that he did so well was encourage people who disagreed with him to come and speak to him face to face, and that's just so rare now.
I mean, imagine being murdered at a university, a place of learning, a place where young people are supposed to blossom and expand their horizons. Appalling, shocking, and witnessed around the world.
And it's been reported today that actually the event that he was speaking at the Utah University, 1,000 students had petitioned for it to be cancelled because they didn't like his views, and the university refused to cancel it and said they believed in free speech. But it just highlights the kind of ideology that he was up against in just being able to have a normal conversation about competing ideas.
And it's always shocking when somebody's murdered in that way, but even more shocking because he wasn't an elected politician.
Yes, yes.
Funny sense.
And of course, political assassinations are terrible, but they have happened throughout history. And shocking as they are, they do just happen. But he wasn't elected. He hadn't put himself on that platform.
And we shouldn't forget, he was a dad with 2 young children.
Yes, and I think reports that his family were even there and witnessed that terrible tragedy. It's appalling.
We'd like to know what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, the news with Sam.
Very good morning to you, just after 10 o'clock. Well, let's bring you a roundup then of that situation in America this morning, where a manhunt is now underway after the assassination of the Conservative activist and close Trump ally Charlie Kirk. The 30-year-old was shot while giving a talk at Utah Valley University. Eyewitnesses say a figure on a rooftop fired a single round, hitting him in the neck. Kirk was rushed to hospital by his security team, but 2 hours later, the US president announced Kirk had died of his injuries. 2 people arrested earlier have since been released, and police say the gunman is still at large. Former presidents and world leaders have condemned the killing. Here, Sir Keir Starmer has called it heartbreaking and insisted political debate must never descend into violence. While Donald Trump, visibly furious, described Kirk as a martyr and blamed what he called radical left-wing politics for the attack.
Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace.
Sir Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure after fresh revelations about US Ambassador Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein. Documents released by American lawmakers included a letter in which the Labour peer described Epstein as his best pal. Lord Mandelson has admitted the friendship lasted far longer than it should, saying he relied on assurances of Epstein's innocence, which later proved false. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch says his position is untenable, and several Labour MPs have also broken ranks, calling on Mandelson to resign. The Prime Minister, though, standing by him, insisting a full vetting process was carried out.
The relationship between the US and the UK is one of our foremost relationships, and I have confidence in the Ambassador in the role that he is doing.
Staying with politics, and Labour's deputy leadership race has narrowed again. Dame Emily Thornberry has pulled out after failing to gain enough support. Her withdrawal comes just a day after Alison McGovern dropped out, leaving 4 candidates still in the running. They include Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, former Commons leader Lucy Powell, Clapham MP Bel Ribeiro Addy and Paula Barker, the ex-Shadow Housing Minister. The contest was, of course, triggered by Angela Rayner's resignation last week over her tax affairs. Well, in the biggest push yet for Britain to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, senior political figures are uniting behind a new plan. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, Reform's Deputy Leader Richard Tice and ex-Brexit negotiator Lord Frost will publish their blueprint on Thursday, a detailed legal and diplomatic roadmap titled Why and How to Leave the ECHR. The report, backed by Baroness Arlene Foster, argues the move would restore full sovereignty to the UK. Critics, though, warn it risks undermining international cooperation. Britain is set to step up its support for Ukraine with plans to begin large-scale expertise have already proved effective against the Iranian-made Shahed drones that Russia continues to launch, but a fraction of the cost of traditional missiles. The move comes after NATO forces in Poland shot down suspected Russian drones that violated their airspace, the first known NATO engagement of the war so far. And Londoners are enduring the fifth day of tube chaos as the RMT strike shuts down the entire underground service. The union has rejected a 3.4% pay offer and is pushing for shorter working hours. Demands Transport for London say they can't afford. The RMT boss has called on Mayor Sadiq Khan to hold a summit, warning more strikes could follow if there's no breakthrough. And with trains at a standstill, e-bike trips have surged by up to 75% as commuters scramble for ways to get around. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
Hello, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, a major manhunt is underway after the assassination of the free speech champion and co-founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. He was shot dead while he was speaking at Utah Valley University.
Well, there's been an outpouring of condemnation over his killing and also an outpouring of support for Charlie Kirk, as President Donald Trump calls it a dark day for America.
Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace.
Well, experts in America are calling it a nation on edge and warning of a vicious spiral in political violence.
Let's go to Washington to our very own Bev Turner, live from Washington, D.C. Bev, Washington waking up to the grim reality that one of the great champions of free speech has been martyred for his cause.
That's right, Andrew. We are 5 hours behind you here in Washington, and this was all anybody was talking about from about 3 o'clock local time here yesterday afternoon. The news came that Charlie Kirk, a very prominent conservative activist, a devout Christian, who was the most prolific proponent of free speech in the alternative news space online, had been shot. For about half an hour or so, maybe more, there was optimism that he'd made it to hospital. The footage was extremely graphic. Of course, there were thousands of pupils, students of the University of Utah in the crowd. Everyone was filming Charlie Kirk. He's so well known here. He's so famous amongst that generation. And the footage was online almost instantly of his assassination. But then came the wait. Would he be okay? Rumours were circulating he'd had a pulse. He was in hospital. People who were there said he was in a critical condition, but it was going to be okay. And then we got news from Donald Trump that things weren't looking good for Charlie Kirk. Not long after, the president made the announcement from the Oval Office, and he was the one that announced the death of Charlie Kirk. Why? Because Charlie literally helped Donald Trump to get elected. He'd been politically active for 10 years. He was only 31 yesterday when he lost his life. But he'd been a huge part of the MAGA movement because he believed in very old-fashioned, traditional, conservative Christian values. He made no apology for that. And he went around campuses all around the world, actually. He loved the UK. He'd been to the UK quite recently and debated at Oxford and Cambridge at the universities, proudly saying that he dropped out of college, that he didn't go to university, and yet he would take on some of the best intellectual minds across the world. He was incredibly intelligent, bright, a man of ideas, and it's incredibly sad here that he has died, because he was really blazing a trail, actually, for free speech at a time when it feels that people can't always say what they think.
Bev, what really stood out about Charlie Kirk was his ability and his willingness to get up close with the people who disagree with him and disagree with him passionately. And so often now we see people polarised into their own sides, talking only to their own followers on social media. Yet he made a point of standing face to face with what he might have called liberals and debating these arguments and even being willing to change his mind where necessary.
Yeah, and he did call them liberals. You know, he was very clear in his debates about the definitions that he was using, and if he started talking with somebody and debating with somebody and they used a word like liberal or conservative or Islam, he would ask them to define, tell me your terms under which we are debating. He was a brilliant orator, and of course he had security detail, because he knew the risks that he was taking. He went everywhere with a security team. There will be massive questions being asked how this shooter was able to get such a clear shot of him. Yeah. It is incredible that nobody else was injured. There are echoes, of course, of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, where the shooter was seen on the roof. There is footage that somebody appeared to see somebody on the roof, very similar to the first Trump assassination attempt. It's worth remembering there have been 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. In fact, the second is in court at the moment here in America. We've had 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. We've then had the successful assassination of Charlie Kirk. Remember, there was never an assassination attempt on President Biden. And there are questions being asked today, as you can imagine, the news networks here in America are discussing nothing but this. It is the only story in town. And one of the debates is about that left versus right dichotomy, and this idea that the left have a monopoly on kindness and compassion is very much being proven wrong at the moment. There is some footage online, you might have seen it, both of you, of young students, campus attendees, who are being told by the presenter of this footage, have you heard that Charlie Kirk has died? And their response is, good, he deserved to die. He had awful opinions. And that, for me, is one of the most damning indictments of the world in 2025, that we've got a young generation who don't believe that it's okay to hold opinions that you may not agree with, and that those people with whom they don't agree deserve to lose their lives. So America is waking up here, 5 hours behind you, as we say here in Washington, D.C., and we'll be bringing you as much of the response, the reaction, the reflection that we can here throughout the day.
All right, Bev, that's Bev Turner, our colleague in Washington, reflecting on the terrible, terrible news that Charlie has been assassinated.
Yeah,
Charlie Kirk assassinated.
Shocking.
Let's hope
very hard to believe.
Somebody comes forward to take his place, but he was an incredibly charismatic young man.
He was, so articulate.
We're going to talk to Tom Slater, who's the editor of Spiked. Tom, I'm a great champion of your publication. I read it all the time. You're all about free speech. This guy has been martyred for his free speech.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, if Charlie Kirk is associated with any cause at all, it is freedom of speech. He belongs to a kind of whole generation, really, of younger, conservative American activists who took up the mantle and who were really pushing back against the climate, particularly on university campuses, but not exclusively, where even just raising a dissenting opinion, a right of centre opinion, was suddenly something that would mark you out for demonisation, protest, even violence. The fact that he was murdered whilst engaging with students in precisely the way that he's done so often over the course of the past decade, wearing a T-shirt that had the words freedom on it, it really underlines what a horrific moment this is for America. Of course, we don't know the shooter, we don't know the motivations, but you can't ignore the broader context of not only that turn against free speech on campus and off, but also this rising temperature, this rising political violence that is taking place in America, and this demonisation of people, particularly on the right of politics, if they dare to utter a dissenting view at this point.
Tom, do you think this has led to a kind of more dangerous tribalism? Because if you look back through the history of the great democracies, so Britain and America are the great democracies, there's always been lively, robust, even vicious debate between political opponents. We'd say that's normal and even healthy in democracy. But what seems to have changed, even in my lifetime, is this inability to see your political opponent as human and therefore worthy of respect. And we've seen outpouring of almost celebration in some quarters that this man has died. And I don't think that's something we would have seen a generation ago.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really concerning and visible trend. I mean, we've heard it a little bit there from Bev in terms of some of the responses from students. There's also an MSNBC contributor who's been kicked off of the channel because he took it upon himself to talk about essentially that Charlie Kirk had brought it on himself. I mean, it would be one thing if you were seeing this kind of rise in political violence in America, but at the same time, it's also kind of being rubber stamped. It's being made excuses for by people who should know better. That's very new. That's very concerning. And it's worth remembering, Charlie Kirk, as you've already been talking about, did not hold political office. He didn't wield power over anyone. He was a campaigner. He had opinions. He put them out there. He argued with people. And for that, he seems, and I say seems because we don't know all the details, to have lost his life. That seems to me to be an escalation in this kind of intolerance that we've been seeing over the past decade or two.
And of course, we've heard a lot, Tom, from the United States. J.D. Vance and others, the President of the United States, have actually questioned, is free speech under threat in this country? Do you think it is?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think all of these things are connected. Fundamentally, we live in a time in which people have taken upon this idea that words are violence.
Yeah.
And the problem with that either invites censorship or it invites violence. And I think we're seeing two different expressions of that on different sides of the pond. Over here, a constant clampdown on speech from the state. In America, increasingly, where they have the First Amendment, people taking matters into their own hands. I think we need to recognise that this fundamental idea that speech is so toxic, dangerous, problematic, that therefore you need to crush it, is producing all these kinds of horrific consequences. And I dare say we're looking at the most stark example in terms of what's happened in the past 24 hours.
Tom, I think we'd agree, and our viewers would agree, that speech is not violence, but ideas can be dangerous, particularly ideas that encourage people, compel people to see their opponents as legitimate targets for physical violence. How do we address those kind of ideas?
I think we have to revisit some fundamental arguments, which is that the reason that we have freedom of speech, or at least one of the reasons that we have it, is to have out our disagreements in ways that don't involve violence. The reason that we have freedom of speech is to take the pressure off, to say that if we might fundamentally disagree, we might have completely oppositional ways of looking at the world and how we want to live our lives. But if you accept this principle that you argue those things out, that you don't resort to violence, that you settle your disagreements through that, then that is what allows us to cohere as a society and have out those differences. It seems so simple, and yet it seems to have been completely lost, at least amongst a small but menacing fringe who want to impose their view and crush views that they disagree with.
And Tom, the worry will be, of course, he was a great advocate for free speech. He was a very brave and popular, charismatic figure. If his killing, if the brutal killing deters others from taking up the same mantle, that would be a real tragedy too.
Absolutely, and a real tragedy for anyone who is looking upon this and thinking, is getting involved in public debate, whatever your political persuasion, worth it? I think Charlie Kirk was an incredibly kind of seminal figure, particularly for a younger generation of conservatives, not just in America, but in the UK. When he was recently kind of writing about his tours of Oxbridge debating, he was surprised by how many people just would stop him in the street. And this is something that I think we, in general, really need to push back against, the idea that in response to things like this, there is a temptation on behalf of people to be a bit cowed, to feel like the sane response is to not get involved in these kinds of things. I think we've got to take the precise opposite conclusion and say that we need to stand up for free speech all the more, certainly in the spirit in which Charlie Kirk campaigned.
All right, that's Tom Slater from Spiked. A little earlier we were showing you some footage which is circulating on the internet, some mail online, of somebody who appears to be on the roof, some about 200 yards, 200 metres from where Charlie Kirk was speaking shortly before the single shot which killed him.
Yes, we're just seeing images of that now, somebody dressed in black. And of course, this person, we assume it's a man, this person had a direct sight to the gazebo, the tent under which Charlie Kirk was sitting, and lots of commentary in the papers about how this was not a high security event, that it was ticketed, but tickets weren't really checked. There was no airport style security. It was just a campus event, and yet will those kind of events be able to go ahead in future after this?
And you have to say, Miriam, I mean, we're not experts, but a single shot, it makes you feel almost like it was a professional hit.
And if it was a hired assassin, will we ever find out who and why?
Absolutely.
Especially the killer's still on the run, as we know.
Yeah, but they'll put a lot of resources to try and find him. Now, still ahead, we're going to be joined by the former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. Up next, though...
Just when Lord Mandelson, when will he get the sack? We'll all have all the latest on that.
I don't think he will.
He's got to. Lots of Labour MPs coming out condemning him now. Well, you're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You'll be very familiar with Colin. He's at birthday parties all around Britain.
But he's not what you may think he is. He's not what he seems.
He's a frozen edition. You can see he's melting. It's an ice cream Colin the Caterpillar cake, which has come out in Marks and Spencer's.
I think we'll have to test that.
I think we will. Let's give it a go, shall we?
Test that. So you do the honours there.
Do you want to do it with me? And we can make a wish.
No. You do that. You go work away at that. While I talk to you guys, because...
Oh, wow.
Claire, there's a story today in the Daily Star about chocolate bars being tuneful. Tell us more.
So, a university professor at Bristol has come up with a design of music commissioned by a couple of chocolate companies. And apparently there is music that they're called the sweetest melody that will enhance the flavour of chocolate, enhance the flavour of eating. And if this actually goes the way that they think it might, then you should be playing music to the...
Does it tell you what type of music you should be playing?
The sweetest, kindest, soulful piece of...
Claire, he just ate your foot. I'll give you another foot. Oh,
no, you're
I've touched
fine.
it.
Absolutely fine.
Norman, pass me a plate.
OK. I would just say that if you go back far enough, the advert that I remember was tunes help you breathe more easily. But I noticed on Claire's story on the in the Star, chocolate bar so tuneful, next to it is a, thank you very much, is a headline saying, I hate marathons, which is Mo Farah. But apparently he's not talking about Snickers bars, he's talking about running.
Maybe we're all eating too many chocolate bars.
Well, yeah.
I'm not going for a run.
Yeah, because Snickers bars used to be called Marathon.
They did.
Yeah. They did.
Much better name.
That was that.
Right, should we give this a go?
Let's give it a got a piece,
I will say, quite difficult to cut, because obviously it's frozen.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. It's 25 minutes past 10. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, we've got our panel-ish. We've got Jonathan List, but Karen Maloney is a victim of the RMT strike, day 5. She's stuck in traffic. So, Jonathan, you have the floor to yourself, which you enjoy anyway.
Well, I normally don't get a chance to speak, so that's a nice thing.
We'll allow Carol to reply to that allegation in the next hour.
We'll try and referee you as best we can. What was your reaction when you heard about the killing, the political assassination at Utah University, 31-year-old? Charlie Kirk?
Andrew, I mean, I think that any decent human being feels shock and outrage on a personal level when a human being is shot dead. I mean, no one deserves to be the victim of violence, and particularly when it's a political figure who goes around. You know, I obviously disagreed with literally everything he said, but I absolutely respected his right to say it, and I think that he should have had the right to say whatever he wanted in the public realm, and that should have been respected. And if we go down the route of silencing people, for whatever reason, I think it's really important. You know, Bev, in her package a moment ago, was sort of talking about the left and right. We do not know who this shooter was, who this assassin was. We do not know anything about them or their motivations. So I think it's very, very dangerous to try and turn this into a kind of a political partisan left v right, saying, well, Joe Biden wasn't a target, as though it's some kind of ledger. This is not the way we do politics.
But it's hard not to think, Jonathan, that Charlie Kirk was assassinated because of his support for Donald Trump.
It might look... Andrew, I don't know. And what I can say in response to that is that we have had attacks in the United States on Donald Trump is the clearest example, and the person who actually tried to kill him and got closest to was a MAGA supporter. He wasn't a Democrat, and you know also this is and I don't want to turn this into on this side on that side, but we have had attacks on left-wing people in the United States in recent years as well. Obviously that Nancy Pelosi was a target. When her husband was attacked with a hammer. Then you had
the Democrat speaker, wasn't she?
Right, exactly, and then you had only a couple of weeks ago. The Minnesota Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, she was assassinated in her own home. And I have to say, and I don't want to turn this into a tit for tat or anything like that, but we do have to point out that when that happened, the response from Republican leaders was one of shrugged shoulders. Donald Trump didn't even phone the governor to offer his condolences. There was almost nothing said at a national level in response to that.
What you're describing is a kind of extreme polarisation, really, isn't it? And political violence is a feature of history, man. You look at almost any country's history, and we've seen rioting in France yesterday. Obviously, France has got a huge history of political violence. Look at the revolution. Yeah. Political violence has always happened. But what seems to have changed in my lifetime, we were just saying earlier on with one of our guests, is that there's no longer the ability to see your political sparring partner as a human being, and we've now seen people decamp into different groups. There's all sorts of polls out there about I wouldn't marry a Tory or these kind of things. It's almost it's infected all of our lives and not just our political debate.
Miriam, I think it's a really interesting question. Obviously, I come into the lion's den of GB News several times a week, and I enjoy it very much. And I have made friends here. I know this is not to make it about me or anything, but I think it's a useful corrective because, I actually used to work for, not many people know this, but I started my career working for a Conservative MEP. He employed someone who disagreed with him on everything, but we had debates in the office, which is incredibly unusual for politicians. So a lot of my friends, it was in Brussels, a lot of my friends were Conservatives, a lot of my friends on the left kind of looked to me with absolute scorn. How could you not only work for Conservative? It was Charles Tannock. So he was on there. He was on the more Remain wing of the Conservative Party, but the party moved past him rather than the other way around. But anyway, but people on the left kind of looked at me occasionally with kind of scorn or derision, not only for working for a Conservative, but having Conservative friends. I've always found it important to get to know people on the other side of politics, to try and understand them. We don't necessarily change each other's minds, but I do think it's important to break bread with people. But having said that, there are limits. When someone is propagating material or ideas that go against every single grain, that seem to cross a line, I don't think that it would be appropriate to be friends with a neo-Nazi, for example.
But
there are limits to that.
That people with ordinary conservative views that you might passionately disagree with, but even a generation ago would have been called mainstream, traditional views about marriage, abortion, those kind of things, when those people are labelled as Nazis, and I know this happens on the left as well, so I'm not making it about left, right, but when you label people with ordinary views as the unmentionables, as the extremes, that in itself encourages this polarisation. and potentially even violence.
But Miriam, I obviously that's true, but then you and I would probably disagree on what those reasonable views are, and I would actually say that the window had gone the other direction. You'd said what were mainstream views before and now considered on the extreme. I think it's actually the other way around. Apart from on gay rights, where I agree that society has moved very much towards being accepting and sort of celebrating of the G and the L maybe in LGBT, but certainly not the T, for example. And so I don't, in general, think that you should call someone a Nazi unless they are actually,
I agree,
sort of relitigating some of the ideas, not exactly the same ideas.
Casually is a term of abuse now, isn't it? Too casually.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Andrew. But at the same time, and without sort of going down to the Godwin's rule or law or whatever, but to talk about the Holocaust. But, I think that one of the lessons that we do have to draw from the Holocaust is not that just it was something that happened in history and that we have to study it for its own sake, although we do have to study it for its own sake, but to identify the patterns, the traits that occurred in that time, not in 1944, but in 1933, because the Holocaust didn't start at the end.
Yeah.
So things that happen that lead up to that, and part of that is dehumanisation, as you'd say, dehumanising your opponents and dehumanising minorities as well.
Yes.
We're going to go to the Commons at some point, because there's going to be an urgent question from the Tories about Lord Mandelson carrying on as ambassador. He is Lazarus. He keeps coming back from the political dead. This is his third comeback. Can he survive? Should he survive?
Look, it's very, very difficult because I do think that he is a highly controversial, problematic figure. That's not an original thought. And his connection with Epstein was known before he was appointed, and that's where it gets to dangerous for Keir Starmer. He didn't necessarily know about the birthday card or the emails that just emerged yesterday where Mandelson was saying fight for strategy after Epstein had first been charged in 2006.
But he actually sent the note about fight for early release the day before he went to prison.
Yeah.
He did not condemn him for the fact he was going to prison for trafficking girls as young as 14. He told him he loved him.
So, look, I think that if I were to try and be dispassionate, I do think that there is such a thing as loyalty, that you do have a close friend, and if you have your best friend was accused of something monstrous, is your first thought to completely push them away and disown them, or to say, this can't be right, and you're telling me that you didn't do this, so I believe you? Now, I'm just putting that out there. Like, people can defend their friends and try to help their friends. It doesn't mean they necessarily approve of everything they did. But I think with Epstein, it came to such a line that at that point, you have to say it's not acceptable.
One of the more jaw-dropping things that's been said by Manson this week was he didn't notice anything because he's gay. Well, I mean, if you don't notice that you're in a house where...
He says he wasn't offered women.
No, I mean,
he's gay.
I think that it's quite clear from the birthday card that Mandelson was in the presence of young women, whether they were underage. I don't know whether Mandelson knew or asked questions. Again, that's not in my purview, Andrew.
You think you might, as a public figure, of Peter Mandelson's...
I think it was very foolish. But the problem here is that if Mandelson goes, that is risky for Starmer, not only because it calls Starmer's judgment into question, even though he didn't know about all the details. I think the other problem is that it then sort of cast aspersions. Trump is coming to the United Kingdom, next week? And Trump is as involved in this as Mandelson. Trump wrote that birthday card, allegedly, but, pretty much it's...
Well, he's denied it.
He's denied it, but, but the Democrats are pretty insistent that they would not have released this unless they were sure that it was his signature. I obviously wasn't there when the birthday card was written. And he's obviously deeply implicated in the Epstein affair as well.
Stay with us, Jonathan, because Suella Braverman, the former Conservative Home Secretary, she is staging a press conference. She's talking about the European Court of Human Rights. We're going to have a listen.
Our courts to follow Strasbourg jurisprudence, however remote from British law and tradition. Parliament, once supreme, has been subordinated. This cannot stand. Sovereignty is not an abstract or ethereal ideal. It is a condition of democracy itself. If Parliament cannot legislate freely, then the people's voice is muted, the people's choice is diminished, and the people's trust is betrayed. So for me, even before we get to the compelling arguments on border control, veterans, or national security, which our speakers will talk about, the overriding reason to leave is to restore our sovereignty. Now, some will say that withdrawal is impossible because of Northern Ireland. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement, they argue, depends upon the European Convention, and to tamper with it is to tamper with peace itself. So let us confront that directly. The Belfast Agreement of 1998 was a triumph of statesmanship, compromise and courage. It is true that the Belfast Agreement refers to the Convention. The references are in the context of protecting civil liberties in Northern Ireland. What is essential is that rights protections remain credible and effective. The specific means of doing that is not prescribed. It is also true that nowhere in the Belfast Agreement is the UK bound in perpetuity to remain a member of the Convention. Nowhere in the agreement is the Convention elevated to some special, entrenched constitutional status. Nowhere is the UK precluded from leaving the Convention. It is also true that the Belfast Agreement is not set in stone, it is not unchangeable, it is not fixed. Over the last 20 years, it has been amended and rewritten to adapt to changing times. The St Andrews Agreement in 2006 made significant changes to the Belfast Agreement, all changes formally incorporated in UK legislation. Or the Hillsborough Castle Agreement in 2010, which made huge changes to the functioning of the Belfast Agreement on sensitive issues like policing and justice. That renegotiation took several months. Many said it wouldn't succeed, but those changes were agreed and enacted again in UK statute. Or the Stormont House Agreement in 2014, the Fresh Start Agreement in 2015, you get the picture. The biggest changes have been through the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor Framework, neither of which commanded the consent of all of the political parties in Northern Ireland, but which were nonetheless unilaterally enacted through the UK Parliament. Now, one of the authors of the Belfast Agreement, the late Lord David Trimble, argued that those changes were significant breaches of the terms of the Belfast Agreement. And yet that didn't stop them being implemented or undermine peace. So my point is this: rewriting and amending the Belfast Agreement has been done before and can be done again. So a future government should renegotiate changes to reflect the UK's withdrawal from the Convention. Now, when considering Northern Ireland and withdrawal from the Convention, any reform must be guided by principles that are clear, firm and just. We must not make the same mistakes as the Northern Ireland Protocol or the Windsor Framework, something that Lord Frost will touch upon. Guiding principles should be as follows. First of all, legal uniformity. There cannot be a two-tier justice system within the United Kingdom. The liberties enjoyed in Belfast must be the same as those enjoyed in Birmingham, in Glasgow or in Cardiff. When the UK leaves the European Convention on Human Rights, Northern Ireland must not be left behind. Secondly, democratic accountability. The governance of rights must rest with Parliament and the courts of the United Kingdom, not with international institutions that answer to no British voter. Third, consultation and confidence. The people of Northern Ireland and their elected representatives must be heard. Dialogue.
Well, we're just going to come out of that press conference there. Suella Braverman there talking about the ECHR. Well, our next two guests are here. They're going to be talking about their new podcast, Quite Right, which calls for a search for sanity and common sense in a world that's increasingly devoid of both.
Yeah, that is Michael Gove, former Cabinet Minister of many years standing, and now the editor of The Spectator, and Miriam, who we love you. And Telegraph, are you? What is your title now?
So I'm now at The Spectator.
You are,
I'm the parliamentary sketch writer and assistant editor.
She's
so
boss,
I haven't
isn't
been
she?
here for very long, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Tell us about the tell us about the podcast.
Well, I mean, it's such an exciting new thing. I know that people probably think, oh, you know, not another one. There's such a glut of podcasts already. But I think that there hasn't been the podcast that exists for people on the right to discuss the issues of the day from that explicitly conservative perspective. And Michael and I agree on a lot, but not everything.
Certainly not everything.
And I think as we really get used to the format and we can start to speak more freely and potentially involving other guests from time to time. I think, who knows? I mean, I'm very excited to see where it might lead.
The whole podcast world has exploded in recent years, and there are some podcasts which are not political at all, which are great, like The Rest is History. But if you look at some of the others, like The Rest is Politics, you have Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, they're centrist dads, self-styled, but really on the left. And then when you've got Ed Balls and George Osborne, both of whom I adore. Again, it's a very sort of cosy, almost uniparty consensus. And the thing that both Maddie and I are determined to do is to explore issues from the perspective that spectator readers will be familiar with, which is we're subversive, we're on the right, but we're not even though I was a Tory MP, we're not prisoners of any political party. And so in the latest podcast, for example, we're talking both about the reshuffle that we had earlier this week, and also we're talking about this new book about Margaret Thatcher, which claims that she was autistic. And Maddie and I discussed the way in which these days almost everyone has to have their own pet defect, disability or condition, and the way in which everyone has to be on the spectrum in some way in order to get a hearing.
How did this author come to that conclusion? Did she know Mrs Thatcher? Did she ever work alongside her? Because she didn't, as far as I can work it out from reading it, what did she know about Mrs T?
Well, the book has lots of good things in it, but this is its biggest flaw. I think it's just a condition of our time. And one of the points that Maddie made on the podcast is that in the past, if you were writing a biography about someone, you would either discover some sexual peccadillo that had not been revealed beforehand. Now that's old hat. Now you've got to discover some sort of curious condition that makes them vulnerable and therefore sympathetic to a modern audience.
Now, of course, we're talking today about the tragic and shocking death of Charlie Kirk. And one of the things he did was explain conservatism to a new audience, to a young audience who perhaps in their whole generation never heard conservatism articulated.
Sticking up for the family.
Exactly. Is that the kind of idea behind the podcast, to bring these not new ideas but once common ideas back to the forefront of politics again?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's right. And it's just astonishing to me. It's, the absolutely tragic and senseless murder of Charlie Kirk. Already I'm seeing him being spoken of as a sort of inherently divisive figure. There are some on the left who struggle even to express a shred of sadness about what's happened, or it has to be so heavily caveated that it becomes meaningless. But a lot of what Charlie Kirk was calling for was simply things that were mainstream opinion until the day before yesterday. We believe in biological sex and the inalienability of that, or we believe in the family. It's shocking to me that these things are considered wacky and controversial and fringe positions.
Yeah, how did supporting the family become subversive?
Well, I think the other thing about Charlie Kirk is that he was always civil. He always welcomed the opposite point of view. His whole position was, we'll have a conversation, and I'm confident that my views will prevail in that conversation. And I think that's what some people found difficult. Obviously, we don't know who the killer was, but it was horrific to see, for example, on social media. There was one writer, an American writer, who had previously written a novel fantasizing about the death of J.K. Rowling, and this writer was celebrating Charlie Kirk's passing. And so you have this toxic environment now where it's not enough to be able to disagree respectfully. You've got to demonise the other side. And the thing about Charlie Kirk, as you can see in all of the interactions that are there online and that you've been sharing on GB News, he's very clear about his principles, but always very courteous. And I think you're right as well, Miriam, that many of the things he was saying were things that people had felt they could no longer share publicly, but they felt inside. And there was this guy, young, appealing, articulate, who was just making a very reasonable case for what might, a few years ago, have been considered unfashionable and unsayable.
Yeah, the worry, Michael, does it stop other people coming forward to speak out in the way Charlie has done?
Well, I do worry, because you've got political violence in America. So we had the governor of Minnesota also killed a few months ago, the assassination attempt on Trump. And it's happened here. So David Amos, a friend of ours.
Really sorry, Michael, we're going to just have to pause.
We've got an urgent question about Lord Manton, of which we'd like your views. By the way, the Tories have taken an urgent question. Let's have a listen.
Many of us will be attending commemorations later on today, and our thoughts are, of course, with all the thousands of people who lost their lives in that despicable terrorist attack, including many British, many American citizens and many other countries. And, Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House's condolences and thoughts will be with the family and friends of Charlie Kirk. Absolutely appalling attack and murder yesterday, Mr. Speaker. We know too well in this House, sitting underneath the two shields of our dear colleagues from across the political spectrum, the terrible consequences of political violence. And I know that the whole House will be thinking of Charlie's family, friends and others, and urging an end to this sort of political violence. It's absolutely appalling. Mr. Speaker, in light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as Ambassador to the United States. The emails show, Mr. Speaker, that the depth and extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Mr. Speaker, Lord Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information. And in light of that, Mr. Speaker, and mindful, as we all are, of the victims of Epstein's appalling crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect.
Neil O'Brien. Mr. Speaker, thank you for granting this statement, and I agree with the words of the Minister about September 11th and Charlie Kirk. But, Mr. Speaker, this is yet another extraordinary error of judgment by this weak Prime Minister. And I pay tribute to the Leader of the Opposition for yesterday securing justice for the victims of Epstein. This raises massive questions. It is not just that Peter Mandelson said that Epstein was his best pal and that he loved him. It wasn't just that he brokered a deal for him while he was business secretary. We now, of course, know that he was working for Epstein's early release after he was convicted. And the simple question is this. Is the Minister now saying that the Prime Minister did not know about any of this at the point where he was appointed? Don't say the boxes were ticked and the process was followed. What did the Prime Minister know at the point of his appointment? Our Minister this morning said, "My understanding was that all of the information was present." Is that correct? Did the Prime Minister know, and will the government now publish all the documents relating to Peter Mandelson's vetting? And if the Minister says he doesn't know at the time, when did the Prime Minister become aware of these revelations? Now, Peter Mandelson quietly stayed at Epstein's house while he was in prison. Mandelson now says that he was wrong to think he was innocent. That's his defence. He had pleaded guilty. So there are huge questions here. Mr. Speaker, did the State Department, the US State Department, give any warning to our government ahead of this appointment? Did the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, give any warning? Have any employees of Global Counsel visited our Washington embassy since his appointment? Next week is going to be the state visit. This is a huge turmoil ahead of it, and I cannot believe that the government have put our monarch in this terrible position. I am glad that Peter Mandelson has now gone. The Foreign Secretary had said that protecting women, girls and victims was her priority. How on earth did that square with the behaviour of the government over recent days, squirming and twisting to try and protect Peter Mandelson rather than the victims? Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. This is a government where you had a corruption minister having to resign over the links to corruption. You had a former police officer having to resign over having not been clear with the police. You've had a housing minister having to resign over not paying tax on a house. And now you put our ambassador to Washington in the middle of the biggest scandal in Washington. This is a weak Prime Minister with error after error of judgment.
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the first thing that we all need to be clear across this House, and I'm sure the honourable gentleman wouldn't disagree with this, is that the victims of Epstein are at the forefront of all of our minds. He was a despicable criminal who committed the most heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of so many women and girls. Clearly, obviously, events in the last few hours. He wrote his remarks before that, but I want to reiterate what I said to him. which is that the emails show that the depth and the extent of Lord Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. And in particular, Mr. Speaker, the suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information. Lord Mandelson has resigned. That decision has been taken, and that is a very, very clear answer to his questions.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure I speak for the whole House in sending our best wishes to our colleague in Washington and Gateshead South for the appalling fire at her office overnight. We send our very best wishes to her and her staff. May I thank the Minister for his statement. The Prime Minister has made exactly the right decision, and I think that has to be acknowledged. He's moved at pace to put that right. Don't be ridiculous. Treat it seriously.
Please. It's very important. There will be a lot of people listening to what's going on in this chamber. So please, let's put some courtesies to each other. Under MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the Minister?
Let's talk to Chris Hope, our political editor. The bombshell announcement from the House of Commons that Lord Mandelson's been sacked.
Yes, we've just been watching that urgent question there. Chris Hope to respond to this breaking news.
Well, absolutely no surprise that Peter Mandelson has lost his job. We're looking at a statement we've got from the government. It says this: in light of additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador. That means that Peter Mandelson has been sacked by Sir Keir Starmer. The emails show, the government says, the depth and extent of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment. In particular, Peter Mandelson's suggestion that Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction was wrongful and should be challenged is new information. In light of that, the government says, and mindful of the victims of Epstein's crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect. This is absolute disaster for Sir Keir Starmer. It calls into question his political judgment that's been on the rack all week, notably at PMQs yesterday, when he frankly flailed around trying to answer questions from the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch. The question at the heart of this has been this: since those photographs first emerged in the birthday book that were prepared there, of course, by Ghislaine Maxwell, many pages there and photographs of Peter Mandelson, some of which is wearing a toweling robe speaking to Jeffrey Epstein, and then of course the emails afterwards have emerged recently, haven't they, about he was talking about this conviction that he had back in the early 2000s. What had changed there? It looked like a political issue here. Clearly the government had asked Peter Mandelson what else can emerge, and now the government is saying that it wasn't aware of the nature of this relationship and how deep it went, and the remarks made, of course, to him as well. But deeply embarrassing for the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
Our political editor in Westminster on this extraordinary breaking news that Lord Mandelson's been sacked. Michael Gove still with us. Michael Gove, editor of The Spectator. We were saying just before you came on air, he will go today.
Yes.
I don't think we quite expected that to be announced in the Commons.
No. I think, to be fair to the Tories, because the Conservative Party is obviously not getting plaudits at the moment, I think the fact that this was announced in the way that it was is down to Neil O'Brien, the shadow cabinet member, who brought the Foreign Office Minister to the floor of the House to answer. At that point, Number 10 will have known we've either got to stick or twist, and they will have known that it was indefensible. On the House of Commons, there would have been Labour MPs calling for Peter Mandelson to resign, and at that point, they had to make that announcement. And of course, it follows on from Kemi Badenoch having what I think most people will agree was one of her best performances at Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday, skewering Starmer on this. And the debate will now move on to the Prime Minister's own judgment.
Which is appointing. What does this also mean for the state visit? Mandelson is the bridge between the government and the President of the United States, a key player in all of this.
Undoubtedly. And I think one of the things in the Prime Minister's mind and those around him will have been thinking this as well, is that next week, to the day, the Prime Minister and Donald Trump will have an hour-long press conference at Chequers. If Peter Mandelson had still been in place then that would have turned into a circus. Actually, it would have been the Circus Maximus. It would have been a gladiatorial contest in which people would have been queuing up to spear and to knife Starmer for his judgment. So now, Number 10 must hope that with this issue out of the way, they'll be able to concentrate on the technology deal that they hope to do, which The Spectator is writing about this week, our political editor Tim Shipman is writing about. But still, the aroma of this scandal will hang over it, and it will be the case that not just Epstein, but also Peter Mandelson will be ghosts at the royal banquet next week.
So these emails have been excruciating as they've emerged, really conjuring up a picture of an intimate relationship, not a casual acquaintance, not a business relationship, but a real intimate friendship between the two. And what the minister seemed to be saying there in response to the urgent question was that the depth and extent of this relationship had not been known about when Mandelson was appointed the ambassador last year. Do you think these questions about Starmer's judgment will carry on, or will a line be drawn under it now?
Yes, they will. And it's striking that there is another Labour peer called Lord Glassman, who of course appears on GBNews, a very smart guy, who, before Peter Mandelson's appointment, sent a memo to Number 10 pointing out explicitly that Peter Mandelson's appointment was high risk and explicitly saying that the Labour government was seen as on the side of paedophiles, and it was linked very broadly with the rape gang scandal. But he made the point then that the Epstein connection, and there was only a limited amount of information in the public domain at that point, would imperil Mandelson's ability to do his job effectively. And I think that Lord Glassman will now be saying to Number 10, look, you were warned. And the question, therefore, is why did they dismiss the warning from one of their own? Because Maurice Glassman is someone who wants a Labour government to succeed.
There'd have been others within Labour, Michael, who would have said, are you insane to give this man this job? Because he's an accident waiting to happen. We knew about his relationship with Epstein. We didn't know how deep it went.
Exactly. It was always a risk. The other thing that I would say, two other things just briefly, are, one, there are lots of people who work in Number 10 who worked with Peter Mandelson in the past and have a very high regard for his political ability, that he is and this is the paradox of Peter Mandelson. He's a hyper-intelligent person who is capable of giving very, very good advice to others, and yet he seems incapable himself of acting on the same prudent principles that he advises others to.
It's about greed, I'm afraid. Both his two cabinet resignations were to do with money and wealthy people.
Well, again, you know, with the full story in all its sort of tragic, gory detail, I'm sure will be relayed over the next few days, whether it's on The Spectator, The Daily Telegraph and elsewhere. But I think you're right. I think that there is a fateful... I think it's more glamour than greed. I think that Peter is drawn towards figures whom he finds charismatic and enigmatic. Often, but not always, people who are wealthy. And the tragedy is that you have someone of such gifts who also displays in his own personal dealings such terrible judgment.
And Madeleine, let's just bring you in. You are a parliamentary sketch writer. You're on the lookout for these kind of behaviours.
Very sad not to be in the chamber right now.
I'm sure.
Make a very good sketch.
How do you think... Obviously, over the last year, a lot of Labour MPs have lost faith with Keir Starmer, having started off being very, very loyal. What effect do you think this scandal will have on their ongoing loyalty to the government, or otherwise?
Rightly, it's going to further alienate the left of the Labour Party, because, and I'm 100% with them on this issue, they have had members from their rank have lost the whip and been dismissed for things like rebelling on the winter fuel allowance and the disability cuts, etc., and often things that are then rowed back on later by the government. So they've got into enormous trouble for this, and they will ask, well, quite rightly, why are you getting rid of Rachel Maskell, but your ambassador, whose pedo adjacency has been well known about for a very long time? And again, you were warned by Lord Glassman. They will say, well, what on earth were you thinking? It shows a contempt for that slice of the Labour Party for sure. And I actually think that the die was partially cast by Neil O'Brien's question, but also on the morning media round, they had Mike Tapp, new junior minister, one of the most ambitious and the most toadying MPs on the Labour benches, eager to make a good impression and to make number 10 further endear himself to number 10. And he found himself unable to come out fighting for Lord Mandelson. He could only say, well, I refer you to what Keir Starmer said yesterday at PMQs. With the subtext of that being, I'm not fully... I probably feel the same as you do, the audience and the presenter.
In 10 seconds, is this the end of Lord Mandelson? Can he come back again? Can Lazarus really come back from the dead again?
Well, he's lost 3 of his lives. Cats have 9. The feline Lord Mandelson may yet come back.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Humiliating.
Yes. So I mean, it's a terrible, terrible fate for him. But of course, as I say, the 2 really significant things ongoing are questions over Keir Starmer's judgment and also sympathy for Epstein's victims.
Absolutely right.
Well, Michael Gove, Madeline Grant, thank you so much for your expert commentary this morning. Well, we're going to return to our top story today. Which is that a manhunt is underway for the killer of Charlie Kirk.
So it's 11 a.m. Thursday, the 11th September, live across the UK. Britain's Newsroom. It's Andrew and Miriam.
Well, breaking news in the last few minutes. Lord Mandelson has been sacked as the UK ambassador to the United States. And we've just been discussing that urgent question in Parliament, Andrew, where Neil O'Brien, the Conservative Shadow Minister, turned up to demand the resignation of Lord Mandelson to find it had already been decided.
And he got it. Now, the American Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, just 31 years old, has been shot and killed at a campus event in Utah.
Well, the shooter remains at large, and we'll have the latest throughout the show. Tributes have poured in as Donald Trump has called it a dark day for America.
Let's go to Bev Turner, who is in Washington.
That's right, and the manhunt does continue here for Charlie Kirk, for Charlie Kirk's murderer, a hugely popular Conservative activist here. Very, very popular, particularly with the youth in America. His loss is felt all around this country this morning. And, of course, I'll be reflecting on that news of Lord Mandelson, the ambassador here in Washington. What is that going to mean politically for the UK in this city?
Bev, thank you very much. I mean, it's astonishing news, actually, that Mandelson has been sacked.
I didn't think he'd last the day. I didn't expect to hear it announced on the floor of the House of Commons while we were on air.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
And
where was the Foreign Secretary, by the way? Because it should have come from her, but presumably she's abroad.
Probably
learning on the job.
Learning the ropes.
Been Foreign Secretary for 5 minutes, and what a thing to happen on her watch.
Absolutely. Well, the state visit next week has really put tight timing on all of this. It couldn't drag on.
No,
I mean, I assume it's too speedy a turnaround to appoint somebody new before the state visit, but you have to assume they'll go for a safe diplomatic civil service option next time.
A career diplomat rather than a political appointment, which the last political appointment in Washington was Peter Jay, who was Jim Callaghan, the then Prime Minister's son-in-law. That didn't work out very well either.
Of course, the irony from the Labour Party's point of view here is that he was a very capable minister and diplomat, and having been out of power for such a long time, experience and talent is perhaps what the party is missing. Well, we'll go back to Bev Turner now in Washington, who also was familiar with this story. Bev, good to see you again. You've been up for a long time now. Obviously, this breaking news about Lord Mandelson has come on a day when America is now mourning the loss of Charlie Kirk, which is obviously huge, huge news. But this is a big story for the special relationship between Britain and America. How was Lord Mandelson perceived in Washington?
It really is a big story here. It's going to be huge. And in fact, I was on air with Andrew when I believe Mandelson's appointment was announced. And Andrew and I both expressed our, as you would imagine, our typical opinion. We didn't hold back on what we thought of that appointment because I thought at the time that it called into question Keir Starmer's judgment. Once Trump was in office, the Epstein files was going to become very important over here. The left and the Democrats indeed are making a huge amount of it, asking for the files to be released, putting huge amounts of pressure on Donald Trump. And we had all seen, by the point at which Mandelson was appointed the ambassador, we'd all seen the pictures of him with Epstein on the island. So he was inevitably going to become dragged into that drama. And sure enough, he's gone. I, for one, have just been sat here this morning looking at the news of Charlie Kirk, looking also at the president's itinerary for today here in Washington. I did not expect that. I did not expect to hear that Mandelson is being stood down from that role. And remember, that job is a great gig. I was lucky enough to go to the ambassador's residence last week. It is an incredible building. It is a beautiful lifestyle, that job here in America. The house is phenomenal. The staff, the responsibility was significant, but not if you're, it's not a similar level of responsibilities if you're a president or a prime minister. You're just representing the country here effectively politically. He was a mover and a shaker, Mandelson, wasn't he? He was very good at the behind-the-scenes shenanigans of being an ambassador. But let's wait to see. He gave one interview a couple of days ago in which he was very apologetic. He was trying to get ahead of this story. But the decision's been made, and let's see who they put in his place, because it is an important role. This is going to be embarrassing for Starmer next week when he's at the state visit with Donald Trump in the UK, because it has always hung over the judgment of the Prime Minister. As I say, it's also, of course, 9/11 here in Washington this morning. I can tell you what the President is going to be doing today. This has just come through now. The President and the First Lady are going to be attending an observance event for September the 11th at the Pentagon this morning. They're going to be then going to New York, and they're going to be attending a baseball game this evening at the Yankee Stadium in New York. And all of that, of course, hanging over all of that will be the death of Charlie Kirk. And no doubt Donald Trump will be making more statements on that today.
And Bev, you'd have probably, because you'll be here for the state visit, of course, you'd have probably been chatting to your new friend Peter Mandelson, who I've known, by the way, since 1988, when he was a spin doctor for the Labour Party. He used to come into my office in Parliament telling us what we should and shouldn't write. He didn't get very far with me, as you can imagine. But this, to me, Bev, was an accident waiting to happen, and I think we said so at the time.
We did. Exactly. In fact, I've been thinking about you, Andrew, this week and wondering what you would have made of Peter Mandelson, because I hadn't met him before this week, and he was pretty much what I expected. Holds his cards quite close to his chest, but you could tell that he was always thinking, even if he wasn't saying anything, asking a few pertinent questions about the political landscape in the UK. Who knows how long he has known that this would end up being terminal for him in that appointment. But I'd like to know from you, Andrew, who you think might get that position now in America. I would love Lord Glassman to get it. I think he's brilliant. He's
I don't think it'll be political,
very
Bev.
much on side with,
I think he'll go.
with the Trump administration.
I think they'll go for a career diplomat who'll be a safe pair of hands. And you know, Karen Pierce, who was ambassador before, she's still in Washington, so maybe she could even temporarily step back into the role. She was apolitical, she had a very good reputation, and she stayed on a little longer when Labour won the election to ensure a smooth transition. So she could step in just very briefly, I would imagine, but I think it will be a career diplomat.
But when you think about it, it was a terrible appointment from the start, because the Epstein files is haunting the Trump administration here. They just want it to go away. Every time you're in a room with journalists, American journalists, they all want to bring up Epstein with Donald Trump. So for Starmer to have placed one of the key protagonists from that drama in our British embassy here was always asking for trouble. Because how does this get handled next week at the state visit? We're going to have Starmer sitting there knowing that this embarrassing episode has occurred in the previous 7 days. You've got Donald Trump there that doesn't want to talk about the Epstein situation. It's really a diplomatic mess. And that appointment should be something that smooths that relationship, that always pours oil on troubled waters. They've just put they put a match under it, basically. They just lit the flames of potential conflict there. So it's something that Starmer's going to have to sort out, and he's going to have to sort it out very quickly, because Donald Trump's on that plane on Tuesday next week over to the UK.
Yeah, and you won't be very happy about this because it's going to overshadow the state visit. Bev, great to talk to you. We're going to carry on getting reaction to the breaking news that Lord Manson has been sacked and ceremoniously sacked as Ambassador to the United States. It was announced in dramatic fashion in the House of Commons today. Quite right where the House... We should have more of that in the House of Commons.
That's right,
actually.
we're used to everything being trailed in the media
Absolutely,
first, but it was a genuine shock to all of us in the studio when it was
announced. The Deputy Foreign Office Minister, responding to a Conservative question, said he's been withdrawn as Ambassador to the United States. In other words, fired over the latest tranche of emails, which were just so excruciating in their detail and affection for a revolting, convicted paedophile. Some of them he sent the emails to Trump, to Epstein, the day before he was going into prison for trafficking girls as young as 14.
And urging him to fight the length of his sentence. Well, we're joined now by political commentator Andy Williams to discuss the fallout from this breaking news. Andy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Interesting words used by the minister in that statement, saying that the depth and extent of the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein is materially different to what was known at the time of Mandelson's appointment. So, of course, it was always known that the Epstein files could be a risk. But in other words, is he saying that the government had no idea just how intimately involved the pair were?
Well, it's quite surprising to me that these emails weren't disclosed before the appointment. You know, the ambassador to the United States is a hugely significant role, and I would have thought that Peter Mandelson would have gone through the most stringent vetting processes, and clearly he didn't. I mean, I think this is embarrassing for the Prime Minister in the sense that it's less than 24 hours since he was defending Mandelson at PMQs, defending him pretty vociferously, at the same time throwing Angela Rayner under the bus, which I thought was quite odd. But it's such a shame, because I think most people would agree that Peter Mandelson was doing a very, very good job as ambassador. Whatever you think of him, his politics, or his past career, you know, he had really built strong bridges with the Trump administration, and he is one of the great political operators of his generation.
Yeah, Michael Gove was making the point, I don't know if you heard him, former cabinet minister, now the editor of The Spectator, what a brilliant political strategist he is, how he's been great at giving advice. He was brought back by Gordon Brown into his cabinet when he gave him a peerage and made him his business secretary. Yet again and again, Andy, Peter Mandelson's own personal life becomes blurred and there's an issue. Yeah. So he lost the first job in cabinet because he didn't declare a £373,000 loan from a very wealthy colleague. The second time it was over his relationship with the very wealthy Hinduja brothers, Indian billionaires, and now his relationship with a toxic paedophile who is another billionaire.
It's absolutely right. And, you know, speaking of The Spectator, Tim Shipman was saying on a podcast yesterday that Mandelson is absolutely superb at giving advice, and he was really valued for that by Tony Blair, by Gordon Brown later when they repaired their relationship. But he's been terrible consistently at taking that advice himself. You know, time and time again, his judgment, I think, has been blurred by, and there is a pattern here, blurred by the sort of starry quality of very wealthy, very successful individuals. And if you look at the correspondence that was released yesterday with Jeffrey Epstein, it's completely indefensible. He knew this man was a convicted paedophile, and he was telling him he loved him and to be strong and that he should fight the sentence, as you said. So absolutely indefensible. And I just think a very sad end, and I think this probably is the end, of what has been a brilliant political career, but marred consistently, as you say, by scandals and by serious misjudgments.
How Sir Keir Starmer must be regretting this appointment, Andy.
Well, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, has responded to the sacking. She says Mandelson might have gone, but just as with Angela Rayner, Starmer dithered when he needed to be decisive. What do you think to that, Andy? And what do you think Labour backbenchers will make of this? They've been forced to defend Mandelson over the last 24, 48 hours, now in vain.
Well, firstly, I think the appointment, it was always a risk because, as we've discussed, Mandelson has form for making these misjudgments, but he is an incredibly canny political operator. And so it sort of made sense in that respect. But as Andrew says, I think it's certainly the time for a career diplomat now who already would have been vetted. I'm sure Starmer will regret it. I don't agree with Kemi Badenoch. He did not. Keir Starmer did not dither over Angela Rayner. He waited for I forget his name now.
Laurie
Magnus's report, and he immediately acted. And Angela Rayner resigned. So no dithering there. I think it is unfortunate that yesterday at PMQs he took one position and less than a day later he seems to have done a 180. I think we can only assume that more is going to come out here, more correspondence, probably more damning information that left the Prime Minister with no choice. But absolutely he will be regretting his decision to make this appointment.
Of course, Andy, the question will be how much was known by the Prime Minister, by the government, by officials at the time that Mandelson was appointed. And we saw the MP Mike Tapp, who's now a recently promoted minister, new MP, doing the morning round this morning, finding himself unable to defend Lord Mandelson over the allegations. Do you think this is going to dent the confidence of backbenchers in the government itself?
Yeah, I mean, that was a hospital pass of a morning round for Mike Tapp this morning. I have to say, good on him for giving it his best shot. There have to be some questions about Starmer's judgment when it comes to personnel. And I'm not comparing Sue Gray to Peter Mandelson in any respect, but Sue Gray was a poor appointment as his chief of staff in Downing Street. That didn't last very long. This has not lasted very long. There are other cabinet ministers, if you think about people like Louise Hay, who was sacked as transport secretary, a lack of vetting about her background there. He does seem to cycle through personnel rather quickly, and you can position that as him being ruthless, which is a word that's often ascribed to Starmer. But you have to wonder whether you have to worry a little, I think, about his judgment when it comes to personnel. And the next move, that next appointment, is incredibly important. Will he bring, as Andrew says, Karen Pierce back, who was widely considered to be doing a superb job as ambassador to the United States? And if not her, it needs to be someone who is unbelievably experienced, deft of touch, and crucially whiter than white.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, great to talk to you again. That's Andy Williams, political commentator. Let's speak to the former Labour minister now, Baroness Hoey. Morning to you. We can call you Kate, I'm sure, can't we, Kate?
Yes, of course.
Great to talk to you. Do you agree with me, Kate? This was an accident waiting to happen.
Well, of course, Peter Mandelson has had his past problems, let's say, in government when he has been removed before, so he's, he understands this. I think he tried very hard. I think, to be fair to Peter Mandelson, he did try very hard to have to go along with a lot of things that I'm sure he hated. I mean, even only a week ago, I think he was tweeting something about, or saying something about, the European Union, as if, we were actually going to benefit from having left. Now, I, of course, agree with him on that, but for him to have said that was quite a change. And of course, that's all tied in with him wanting to make sure that within the Trump administration, he was seen as someone who was perhaps more sceptical of the European Union than he'd been previously.
Baroness Hoey, we've just had a statement from Kemi Badenoch, leader of the opposition, accusing Keir Starmer of dithering over this sacking. Do you think that's fair? Do you think this event will be used by Starmer's political opponents to attack him?
Well, I think I'm amazed that Prime Ministers don't learn from the sort of history of the fact that whenever any of these things happen, if the story lasts more than even a day and it's in the headlines everywhere, the reality is that and the Prime Minister comes out saying we have full confidence, inevitably the media find out more things, and it was just bound to happen. And I think he would have been much, much better to have said right away when he discovered, and also when Peter Mandelson said himself that there were going to be more things coming out. But of course, the whole visit of Trump next week may well have kind of, confused things and made it more difficult, because obviously Peter Mandelson is handling a lot of that in Washington. So they're, now they are in a bit of a difficulty because we have the president coming in a short while and no ambassador. So that will have to be handled. I would imagine today someone new will be appointed, if not already.
It would have been almost impossible, I think, wouldn't it, if Mandelson was still ambassador? His presence at any event would have almost overshadowed it, and it potentially could have embarrassed the king, who would have to at some point be seen with the ambassador, shaking his hand, presumably. So, I mean, I think the timing was very difficult.
The timing could not have been, I think, more difficult for everyone, including Trump himself, because obviously he's having to try and, get away from questions about his relationship with Epstein. It couldn't have been worse, but I think that's another reason, really, why the Prime Minister could have handled it better and quickly. He doesn't seem to have much judgment about people. I mean, I would say that because I'm not a great admirer of him, never have been. But I would say about Peter Mandelson that he was one of the best Secretaries of State for Northern Ireland we ever had. He was actually someone who was prepared to take on the Republicans and the IRA, and so I have a bit of my one side of me sort of sympathy, but of course the sympathy must be with all those people now, the victims this is all coming up again and making life very, very difficult for them.
And I think that is the problem with this particular scandal, is that these crimes were so egregious, so appalling. Horrible. There's no way to gloss over them. It wasn't a kind of a mistake, an error of judgment. This was systematic abuse by Epstein over years and years and years, for which he should have been jailed a long time before he did. Do you think that Mandelson's reputation can ever be recovered after this? Andrew asked earlier to Michael Gove, can he come back for a fourth time?
I would have not thought under this certainly under this government, this Prime Minister, I can't see that happening. I mean, he had settled into a kind of quite a nice lifestyle before he was brought back when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. So I imagine he's probably even regretting now that he did this, but because it's been such a short time as ambassador, and now he ends up with with those people who disliked him and didn't want him appointed in the first place, absolutely feeling they were right and the Prime Minister was wrong.
Amazing, isn't it? Just finally, it was quite astonishing to hear the dismissal announced on the floor of the Commons. I haven't heard that for a very long time.
That was. I think the person who'd be most pleased about that would be the Speaker.
I think so. Yeah.
There's all these problems always about things never being heard and the media getting it first and all of that. So that was something very. Quite setting a record anyway.
It's very dramatic.
Which hopefully will be repeated on any other disasters that the Prime Minister is likely to have in the near future.
Normally it's boring old questions on a Thursday morning, but there we are. We get the Secretary of State, we get the US Ambassador sacked on the floor of the House of Commons.
Indeed.
Fabulous. Baroness Hoey, Kate Hoey, lovely to talk to you, as always. Now, still ahead, we will have more on the sack of Lord Mandelson. It really is an extraordinary moment. He only took up the job in February. He's not even lasted a year, and it follows just a week after the sacking or resignation of Angela Rayner. Is this government falling apart?
Turbulent times, and also in our main story of the day, the manhunt that is underway after that tragic killing of Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. We'll have the latest on that.
This is Britain's Newsroom, Britain's favourite morning show on GB News.
GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time is 11:26. That was Jonathan Liss making a racket over there. We're Andrew and Miriam here. We've got the panel. Malona's made it. The RMT, she's survived the excesses of the RMT
It took an hour and a half to get here, more than that. My cab company let me down. Anyway, I've been here for ages now because I got in 3 minutes after he went on air.
Right. Well, I ran here most of the way today because no car turned.
You didn't run from Hampstead,
I've got people in trainers on. I've still got them on.
Oh, well, are you running back?
We were supposed to sit
Probably
on the sofa earlier, but we couldn't because he had such terrible shoes.
It's so annoying, isn't it?
I've been doing 18,000 steps a day because of this wretched strike.
I know, I'm sick of it. And they think 75 grand is not enough to live on.
But let's talk about Peter Manson. You and I have known him for donkey's years, Malone.
Yep.
We've all had run-ins with him. I've had very many run-ins with him. And I think this was entirely predictable.
Despicable sleazeball of a man. You know, sacked twice by the Blair government. You know, and both times embarrassed.
Links to rich people.
Yeah. The thing is, he's obsessed by money. The guy doesn't have a socialist bone in his body, and I don't know. I think he only ever went.
Like him, surely.
I think he only ever went into politics for the contacts he could make in politics, so that he could make money, and that's what he's actually done. He's a very rich man now. But you know, Starmer's got a lot of questions to ask him. There's one why it's taken him so long. It's taken him the whole week to sack him, and people are saying, "Oh, it's because these emails came out today. There's different ones." I'm sorry, but this is the second scandal in a fortnight to engulf this government, and because Starmer has let it go on and on and on, saying he supported him yesterday, knowing what was coming. And don't tell me Starmer hadn't known about those emails, hadn't seen those emails. Number 10 were warned before they gave him that US ambassador's job.
He told us, Mandelson, a few days ago, there's more embarrassing stuff to come. So why was he not chopped? Why was he not...
Do you know what
done there and then?
I mean, they were all revolting, these emails, and they made my flesh creep because it sounded like he was infatuated with Epstein. But the one that made my flesh...
lovelorn teenager.
That's what it was like. But the one that made my flesh creep was when he said maybe he was talking about the victims, and he said maybe because I'm a gay man, I didn't know that he was procuring women, and that's just the most ridiculous thing. Michael Gove out there, we just had a laugh. I've nicked a line from him because he said he's a gay man, he's not Stevie Wonder. Of course he could see what was going on around. I did say I would attribute it to Michael. Of course he knew what was going on when he was if he's at Epstein's Caribbean hideaway. Of course he knew what was going on. The women were everywhere.
They were. And they were...
He didn't know... I mean, look, you can be surrounded by women and you don't necessarily know they're underage, you don't necessarily know they're being trafficked. I mean, look, there are a lot of things to accuse and attack Peter Mandelson for, but to say that he knew there was criminality happening is an unfounded allegation.
Well, there are so many powerful, influential, wealthy people caught up in this scandal who may or may not have known that what they were getting involved in did have criminal roots. It's not the only one.
Sure, but look, the problem, Miriam, now, and one of the reasons that Starmer might have delayed, is that it becomes incredibly embarrassing because who's coming to London next week on a state visit but Donald Trump, who is in the same bag as Peter Mandelson. They are equally implicated or non-implicated.
You just made the same accusation. I'm
not making an accusation of criminality. I'm saying that they are equally equally aligned or implicated, whatever it is. If Mandelson is up there, then Trump is on exactly the same level.
It's a totally different argument.
Said on the eve of this ghastly man, this monster going to prison for trafficking girls as young as 14.
Yes.
I love you.
Yes.
I appeal against the length of your sentence. You need strategy.
Your friends, and what they said he also said everything can be turned into an advantage. What the abuse of underage girls can be turned into an advantage. But more importantly, your argument about Trump is not our concern because he's not in our government. He's not part of our government.
No, I understand that, Carol.
So your argument doesn't
I understand
Peter
that. I'm not saying that Starmer has any power to sack Trump. I'm saying that Trump is coming to London and that, Mandelson was obviously going to be a big part of that state visit as the ambassador. And now you've had the Prime Minister say that someone who is basically on the same level as Trump is not good enough to be our UK ambassador.
Well, he's
which
not
kind
on
of
the same.
exposes,
Can you seriously imagine
Trump to some difficult
Can you
questions.
seriously imagine there'll be emails to Jeffrey Epstein from Donald Trump saying, "I love you. You're my bestie friend."
Well, he literally did say that in 2003.
And there was another one where he said something like, you wait hours for him to come. He comes. He spends a few hours, and then he goes, and you're alone
the
again.
return of the Messiah.
It's like he was having.
Okay, but we know that the birthday card that Trump allegedly sent to Epstein it doesn't look great if you look at the contents of reveling in sort of the secrets they have, with the shape of a woman with her breasts outside it. I'm saying that this exposes Trump to some awkward questions.
We talk about
if Mandelson, but that is why Starmer's taken. That is one of the reasons why Starmer's taken.
Starmer has taken this action because Trump was going to meet the king and Mandelson was going to be there. And you cannot have a man who supports a paedophile at the state banquet and walking around with
But Trump is a lot more ruthless than you think he is, Carol, because, Starmer... Sorry, I say Trump.
About Trump.
Sorry, I meant Starmer is a lot more ruthless
he's not the least bit ruthless.
than people think. Because he will get rid of anybody.
He did not get rid of him quick enough.
Try not to sack him because it looks...
Because it looked bad, and also in the run-up to the state visit, it looked bad.
From Starmer's point of view, the timing of PMQs was a bit unfortunate because he probably would have wanted an extra 24 hours to assess it before nailing his colours to the mast, and he nailed his colours to the wrong mast yesterday. But he obviously wasn't quite ready.
But Miriam, that says acres and eons about his judgment.
But surely, Carol, you believe in due process and he should take time to consider the evidence.
That phrase has been peddled around.
I think the emails that were out yesterday morning were enough for him to go.
But due process is a phrase that's been bandied around to protect Starmer. I'm sorry, this guy was fired twice by the last Labour government for dodgy dealings. He took 350 grand off Jeffrey Robinson. Then what else did he do?
Then he got Hinduja Brothers, billionaire.
That's right. Okay. So he is dodgy. And to put that kind of man back into government again, in one of the plushest, most coveted jobs there is, there was always going to be trouble. Because Mandelson is a wrong-un. We've been around long enough now, we're so old. I mean, I can remember seeing Mandelson sitting on oligarchs' yachts surrounded by Deripaska, the Hinduja brothers, going on holiday with them. The guy is involved with what's the word? How come dodgy people?
Okay, look, if I can just say that I'm not here to defend Peter Mandelson, but I'm not. But this programme is about free speech and offering contrary views, so here it is. Peter Mandelson, I agree, has been implicated in some dodgy things over the last few years, and I would not personally have appointed him as a senior official in my government if I was leading it. However, he is a man when competence is in short supply. He is a man who's proven his competence. He did quite well as an EU commissioner, which is now largely forgotten, but he was good in that role, and he gets things done, and he's prepared to crawl. And my goodness, that guy was crawling to Trump.
What did he get done as a EU commissioner?
Well, he was very involved in trade with EU.
You don't know. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything meaningful. Mandelson always takes the job
what does that mean? He signed trade deals. I can't. I don't have a list of his CV, but he was generally thought of in Brussels
he was given that job,
as a competent.
He was given that job in Washington against the wishes of Donald Trump. Trump didn't want him because he'd insulted Trump personally on many occasions, and Trump didn't actually want him.
Trump loves people.
But Starmer put him in anyway, which just shows you how appalling his judgment is.
Look, the fundamental point is that we need to have a seasoned diplomat in that position, and that's the right thing for.
Not one that's been sacked twice before.
Carol, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Now, Nigel Farage has spoken. He says the sacking of Mandelson has become inevitable. He says the Prime Minister is becoming ever more distant from his parliamentary party.
Well, we've got lots more coming up on that. Also, we're going to be back in Washington, D.C. with Bev Turner. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Lots of showers to come over the next few days. Gusty winds blowing them along mean there'll be some sunny spells in between the downpours. Low pressure is the reason why. Sitting just to the northwest of the UK, tightly packed isobars here, bringing some very strong winds over the northwest of Scotland, and well, pretty persistent rain here for parts of the Highlands and the Western Isles. Elsewhere, as I say, we will see some sunny spells between the showers, which tend to zip through on that brisk and gusty wind. Temperature-wise, well, about average for the time of year. Feeling cooler than yesterday for sure. Certainly when the winds blow and the showers come along, it'll feel fairly fresh, generally 17 to 19 Celsius. As we go through the nights, a great deal of change. You can see the swirl there, the low pressure still dominant up to the northwest. The showers further south will ease off. Still plenty of them around for this evening's rush hour, however. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads. 1 minute it's dry, the next minute you're in a torrential downpour. There's the low pressure and the swirl bring more persistent rain to the Highlands and the Western Isles. Still pretty gusty here as well. The winds will ease a little bit overnight, but it's going to stay pretty breezy through the night. One thing we will see, certainly inland across many central and eastern parts, is the showers tending to fade away. So for many here, it will become pretty much dry from late evening onwards with decent clear spells. But it's far from dry in the northwest of Scotland. It stays pretty wet and windy here. Temperatures dipping down into single digits and a freshish start therefore to Friday. But for many, it will be a bright start again. Like this morning, much of the Midlands, eastern England, starting off with quite a bit of sunshine. But like today, the showers will get going once more and become pretty widespread, blown along by a fairly brisk and gusty wind. Again, like today, we could see a crack of lightning, hear a rumble of thunder, and temperatures around or a touch below average.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes to 12. You've been getting in touch all morning with your views on gbnews.com, your say, and there's been so much support for Charlie Kirk. Dave Von Gooby says, Charlie Kirk, you were a great man and will be remembered fondly by all those who loved you and had the pleasure of seeing many of your unbiased and fair debates. God rest your soul. Lots like that.
Just 31, of course, and wife and 2 children. And there is a terrible suggestion that his family may have even been at the University of Utah when he was assassinated. We're going to go back to Washington and talk to my former sparring partner here, Bev Turner, who is our woman in Washington now. Bev, 2 huge stories, the terrible, tragic killing, brutal killing of this extraordinary campaigner for free speech, and the sacking, pretty brutal, of Peter Mandelson.
Yeah, absolutely. If we start with the Charlie Kirk story, what's emerging now online are all sorts of theories who might have wanted to kill Charlie Kirk. There's actually a long list of people that would have wanted to kill Charlie Kirk because he was absolutely fearless in his condemnation, his criticism actually, of various groups, whether it's transgender activists or Muslims, or he'd started to take shots at Israel recently, verbally. And so there will be questions being asked this morning, and you can imagine social media is awash with the theories of who might have wanted to silence such a powerful voice. Because make no mistakes, Charlie Kirk was being touted as a potential future president of the United States of America. As I've said earlier today, he was effectively an honorary member of the Trump family, very good friends with Donald Trump Jr. particularly, and Eric Trump. And it was the president himself who announced his death yesterday. All of the flags here in Washington, D.C. are flying at half-mast. And that is pretty much unprecedented for somebody that wasn't actually an elected politician. But it gives you a sense of his influence. A devout Christian, a family man, and actually somebody that made it okay to say, I believe in something. I believe in whatever it is, and I will debate you, and I will argue with you, and I will shake your hand at the end of it, and we will part ways. And it's such a tragedy that somebody that was so talismanic in terms of that particular debate has gone, because the next generation very much need that. The other disturbing footage that I'm now seeing online this morning are the number of people who were celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk last night and are continuing to do so this morning because of his opinions. And you just have to think, where has the humanity gone? Where's the empathy and the compassion? What's happened to these young people that they think somebody literally deserved to die? One woman I was just watching online said, I don't mind bad people dying. Bad people deserve to die. So there's huge questions to be asked about what's happened to the psychology of so many young people across the world. And then on Mandelson, well, that's only just broken whilst I've been on air with you guys this morning. As we said, Andrew, you and I probably saw this coming when his appointment was made fairly recently. Keir Starmer will be working out how to handle this. Who does he put in that beautiful house here in Washington, in that plum job? To be glad-handing it around the parties of DC and representing the UK on the global stage and talking to Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump ever really expressed his admiration for Peter Mandelson. He's very diplomatic, of course, when it comes to the UK. The president, he has a very big place in his heart for Great Britain, and so he often treats us maybe with a little bit more diplomacy and politeness than he does maybe some other countries. So let's see what his statement is on the removal of Peter Mandelson from that post, and I'll be fascinated to see who gets that position as well. And of course, it's 9/11 today, so America always takes pause to reflect on where it is in 2025. It's going to be another extraordinary week here in Washington, DC. I was looking forward to coming back on and talking to you, but I did not expect it to be under these very sombre circumstances. We'll also be waiting, of course, to hear about any news of the funeral of Charlie Kirk, and particularly how that will sit on the timetable, on the schedule of the president and his family, because they'll want to be in attendance. And maybe just the last word this morning about Erica, Charlie Kirk's wife. There is beautiful moving footage of her online announcing her husband onto the stage at events. She adored him. Their marriage was clearly very strong. He spoke passionately about the benefits of being married, about the benefits of fatherhood and growing big, beautiful, settled families. And I think, as you said this morning, Miriam, when did that become so controversial? Very recently, in fact, and he was doing a phenomenal job of telling the younger generation it's okay to want to get married, it's okay to want to have children, it's okay to want to be a Christian, and it's okay to believe in something bigger than yourself, regardless of what religion that was. And that is the loss that we are left with now, with the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk.
All right, that's Bev Turner in Washington. Great to talk to you, Bev. After the break, we're going to be talking to Jeffrey Archer, Lord Archer, who has been seen many political scandals in his time as a former deputy chairman of the Tory party, to get his take on the sacking of Lord Mandelson. Yes, he's gone because of his unacceptably close relationship to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. What an extraordinary story. On the eve of the presidential state visit. Couldn't make it up, could you? But first, here's your travel.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Northern parts of Europe will see any heavy downpours and thunderstorms easing away, though some light showers remaining in places. That's away from Spain and Portugal, though. High pressure dominating, so largely settled here. Plenty of sunshine, though we could see some occasional showers affecting Barcelona. Also some showers across northern parts of Italy, Switzerland and also Austria. But elsewhere across Italy, the Adriatic coastline and across Greece, plenty of sunshine to come. That theme continuing as we head into next week, and temperatures widely in the mid to high 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Juber, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Juber, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, earlier in the show, we did bring you footage of Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, unveiling her blueprint for leaving the ECHR, which was an event held at the Prosperity Institute. Now, we need to tell you that the Prosperity Institute is owned by the Legatum Group, which is also one of the lead investors in the holding company of GB News.
Now, in breaking news, as you'd have heard in the last hour, Lord Mandelson has been sacked as the British ambassador to the United States after a tranche of emails were revealed over the past week which showed the depth and the intimacy of his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to be talking now to Jeffrey Archer, who for many years was a doyen of the Tory party and has seen some political scandals in his time. Jeffrey, you and I were only talking about Mandelson yesterday, speculating, could he survive? The latest tranche of emails this morning meant he simply couldn't.
Yes, and I think, to be fair to Kemi Badenoch, who had a disastrous Prime Minister's questions 2 weeks ago, she learned very quickly, didn't she? Because she had a very successful Prime Minister's questions this Wednesday. And I think that was part of the realization for the Prime Minister that there was no way out.
And he because he looked very defensive, and she used all of 6 of her questions to challenge him about Epstein. And both you and I noticed the same thing, Jeffrey. Behind the Prime Minister is the litmus test. There were sullen, silent Labour MPs sitting behind the Prime Minister who clearly thought Mandelson had to go.
Well, they weren't willing to support him. You're quite right. They sat there with their hands folded. And when they don't agree, they say, oh, get lost, you're wrong, shove off, he's great, all that sort of rubbish, which is part of parliamentary battle. And you're quite right, they didn't join in that way. So I think his days were numbered. And there's the old maxim that if you're 3 days in the press, you're in trouble. If you're 4 days in the press, you've gone. If you're 5 days in the press, you're gone.
Now, Lord Archer, you said this is an old maxim, but I certainly get the impression, and I haven't been involved in politics as long as you two gentlemen, not to put a finer point on it, but you get the impression that the arrival of the internet and 24-hour media has sped up the political cycle, sped up the news cycle. Is that true? Would this have happened a generation ago?
That's a very good point, Miriam. I wouldn't disagree with that. In fact, I'd go further. I was telling someone the other day, as a young MP in the days of Harold Wilson, that I used to get a dozen letters a week, and they were fairly polite and respectful. And he said, oh, I get 100 emails a day, and they're very rude. And I thought, that's the change in 50 years. You're quite right. The world has moved on, and news breaks, and it's much bigger than it ever was. So you're quite right. It's a new world we live in, and old fogies like me have not yet learned to handle it.
But what about Mandelson? A colourful character is one of the descriptions of him, which covers many things, Jeffrey. But he's, in my view, he's got a fatal flaw. We were talking to Michael Gove earlier. He gives brilliant political advice to other people, but he can't get his own house in order. Twice he was sacked from the Blair's cabinet because of his association with wealthy people, and he's been sacked as ambassador again because of his inappropriate association with a very wealthy man who was a serial paedophile.
Yes, and I think it was the right thing that he should go. But it's very easy in life to only criticize and to only see one side of the subject. And I agree totally that he had to resign. But he was, by all accounts that I have heard, an outstanding ambassador who had a relationship with Trump that was very useful to Great Britain. So I put that on one side. And I'll tell you something personal. In the 1992 general election, when Tony Blair was elected by a vast majority, I was on the ground in 300 constituencies. And I can tell you, I've never come across a more formidable opponent in my life. You've got to get up very early in the morning and pour a lot of cold water on yourself if you're up against Peter Mandelson. He ran a brilliant campaign. So that's one side. Now, the other side, you're quite right to point out, Andrew, is the flaws. You're quite right to point that out. And perhaps Miriam is right that we live in an age now where
Lord Archer, I'm so sorry to cut you off. We are out of time. It's fascinating to hear your insights. Thank you so much.
Jeffrey Archer.
Bye.
Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Dawn. Big story going on. Lord Mandelson has been sacked. And, of course, the continuing ramifications of the death of that fantastic influencer.
Indeed. What terrible news. Well, here we go with Tom and Dawn. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, it's Tom and Dawn.
10 days ago, Sir Keir Starmer declared a new era for his government. Since then, he's lost his Deputy Prime Minister, his American ambassador, and he's had a reshuffle.
And we're going live to America as the manhunt looks for the killer.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Lots of showers to come over the next few days. Gusty winds blowing them along mean there'll be some sunny spells in between the downpours. Low pressure is the reason why. Sitting just to the northwest of the UK, tightly packed isobars here, bringing some very strong winds over the northwest of Scotland, and well, pretty persistent rain here for parts of the Highlands and the Western Isles. Elsewhere, as I say, we will see some sunny spells between the showers, which tend to zip through on that brisk and gusty wind. Temperature-wise, well, about average for the time of year. Feeling cooler than yesterday for sure. Certainly when the winds blow and the showers come along, it'll feel fairly fresh, generally 17 to 19 Celsius. As we go through the nights, a great deal of change. You can see the swirl there, the low pressure still dominant up to the northwest. The showers further south will ease off. Still plenty of them around for this evening's rush hour, however. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads. 1 minute it's dry, the next minute you're in a torrential downpour. There's the low pressure and the swirl bring more persistent rain to the Highlands and the Western Isles. Still pretty gusty here as well. The winds will ease a little bit overnight, but it's going to stay pretty breezy through the night. One thing we will see, certainly inland across many central and eastern parts, is the showers tending to fade away. So for many here, it will become pretty much dry from late evening onwards with decent clear spells. But it's far from dry in the northwest of Scotland. It stays pretty wet and windy here. Temperatures dipping down into single digits and a freshish start therefore to Friday. But for many, it will be a bright start again. Like this morning, much of the Midlands, eastern England, starting off with quite a bit of sunshine. But like today, the showers will get going once more and become pretty widespread, blown along by a fairly brisk and gusty wind. Again, like today, we could see a crack of lightning, hear a rumble of thunder, and temperatures around or a touch below average.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win a motorhome and cash in our biggest giveaway to date. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be the proud owner of this 2025 Benamar Primero. It comfortably accommodates 4 people and can be driven on your standard driving licence. Plus, you'll also bank an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter.